Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. Now, the Overwatch closed beta was a time of fun, sorrow, craziness, and an immense amount of player feedback since it was the first time the public had gotten a hold of the title and it still wasn't set in stone. There were bugs, map imbalances, over or underpowered abilities, things you'd expect to see in a Blizzard beta. However, for a solid month, one giant, ridiculously overpowered entity dominated the game's first beta phase and started an insane amount of uproar on social media, Reddit, and the official forums. Out of all the initial heroes in the game, McCree stood atop the charts as the hero with the best damage, range, and ultimate use, far outshining anyone else on the roster. From October 8th to November 9th of 2015, the Techno Cowboy reigned supreme, and today we're going to reminisce about why and how he was the best, and what happened to his power once the game crawled closer to release. For those of you who weren't involved in the closed beta and the subsequent patches up until release, consider yourself lucky. Now let's check out why. Let's take a trip back to 2015 when Overwatch was finally dropped into our laps in the form of the limited closed beta. Thousands of players were given the opportunity to test the game, provide feedback, and show off all the hard work Blizzard threw into the game over the previous few years. Of course, the game had only seen limited internal testing and couldn't really progress balance-wise until a good number of players that weren't neck deep in its development were able to judge the title for themselves and tell Blizzard all about it. So match after match, test after test, players started to slowly figure out all the little nuances, niches, and imbalances in the game and tell everyone else with eyes and ears how they felt about it via forums, videos, articles, and social media. Now, one of the primary heroes under fire was Jesse McCree, who at the time was constantly called the Cowboy Sniper. At the start of the beta, McCree was far and away the best hero in the game. He had no direct counters on the roster, and trying to counterplay McCree was nearly impossible if the McCree player even had half an idea what he was doing. So at this point in time, quick play was the only mode available, and there were also no hero restrictions. A team could stack McCrees and win pretty handily, or if you did manage to get a team with a viable comp, which was about 2-2-2 at the time with 2 DPS, 2 tank, and 2 support, a single McCree on the enemy team was still just incredibly intense to deal with. Remember, this was before D.Va, Mei, and Genji, so there weren't really any mitigation abilities to deal with McCree like Defense Matrix, Deflect, or just freezing him in place or walling him off. So what was available to go up against McCree? Well, you could try counter-sniping him with another McCree, but that really fell up to chance and whether or not you had your abilities available and who was the best McCree. Other snipers might be able to work, but only if you could get the drop on him, because he could snipe back, and a Widowmaker wasn't safe from his Peacekeeper. You couldn't necessarily tank him because of his mobility and stopping power, so Reinhardt, Roadhog, and Winston were pretty much out of the picture in direct combat since his Fan the Hammer was so powerful, and his Flashbang could stop even a Reinhardt shield. Every other hero could just be picked off at range by even a half-decent McCree, so unless you got lucky with a Junkrat Grenade, a Pharah Rocket, or a well-placed turret, that was pretty much all you could do to deal with him, and that's still hit or miss. McCree was basically godlike at the beginning. He had massive range, and he could one-shot low and medium health targets with a well-placed headshot. The trick was getting in close to the McCree after he used his flashbang and roll to maneuver, or just flanking him without him knowing. These were all pretty difficult though, considering he could just murder you from pretty much any range with 0 damage drop-off. That's right, he had huge damage whether you were in his face or across the map, because his left click had literally no drop off, and as long as he hit you with it, it would do the maximum amount of damage, which let him snipe so effectively. To top that off, the Peacekeeper pistol fired relatively quickly and didn't have any of the drawbacks that actual snipers in the game had, namely the lack of situational awareness or mobility issues. For example, Widowmaker had to be scoped for the damage increase, which slowed her movement considerably and dropped her situational awareness because of the narrowed scope vision. Hanzo, on the other hand, had to deal with reduced movement when his bow was drawn, as well as mastering arcs for higher accuracy and a slower rate of fire. McCree didn't suffer from either of those issues though. He was unmatched at short range as well, with his flashbang ability stopping any hero in their tracks, giving him a solid second to put up to 6 point-blank shots into the target, either headshotting or opting for the Fan the Hammer. So he could snipe and see what's going on around him while moving around fluidly and quickly. He could even melt tanks with the McCree combo, and it was an insane amount of damage in a short period of time that was nearly unavoidable. All of that, and we haven't even gotten to Deadeye, which was actually super OP at the time for a few reasons. First, it had a ridiculous duration. For 20 entire seconds, a McCree player could walk around slowly with his gun, ready to annihilate anyone who was in line of sight. Secondly, even if they ran for cover, that was 20 seconds that your team had complete zone control, unless someone was lucky enough to pop the McCree before he was able to let Deadeye loose. I'm sure you can imagine how difficult that would be, since even though his ultimate was just as easy to dodge then as it is now, 20 seconds of pushing the payload while everyone is hiding behind walls means that you can potentially get across that really difficult choke, or potentially get to the next point. It didn't take the community long to figure out all of this, and within days, the bug reports of how broken McCree was in every conceivable way starting to flood the internet. Now we've got this debate going on between not only beta testers and Blizzard, but non-beta testers who had been watching players via streams and YouTube, as well as crunching numbers in theory crafting simulations and conversations. Some were pushing to keep McCree as he was, stating he's a high skill hero just like any other sniper. Others who were on the receiving end of the Peacekeeper shouted about how hard it was to deal with the hero on just about any level, and how he needed a nerf. McCree even became the target of several internet memes, and although I like being the Overwatch historian and not necessarily the internet meme archive, I think it's still important so you guys can totally see how much the community hated McCree and that current state, except for people who played him. So for a month straight, both sides of the argument progressed, and McCree players focused on honing their lethality skills and hoping McCree wouldn't get nerfed, and non-McCrees focused on trying to find new ways to beat the cowboy back and save the day. Even though these players got better and better at their respective roles, the argument raged on for nearly a month. It got so bad that there were players that refused to play in matches that had a McCree on the enemy team, or matches that didn't have 6 McCrees on their team to ensure the win. He's one of the only heroes that's gotten the entire community up in arms about the gameplay, to the point where entire posts and conversations revolved around how to build a comp to nullify the McCree player on the enemy team instead of how to capture a point or push a payload. Blizzard remained relatively quiet on the whole thing, chiming in every once in a while with assurances that they heard the community's outcry and they were working towards balance changes not only for McCree, but for many other heroes as well. However, that did take an entire month to propagate, so McCree players dominated the game for that month, and never again have we seen a hero take the entire roster in terms of power. There have been some sick comps and overpowered ult combos, but not really a sole game-breaking hero kit that didn't need to synergize with anyone else. So the patch dropped shortly after BlizzCon 2015, and it was actually a 1-2 punch to McCree's dominance and a very welcome breath of fresh air to anyone in the community. The direct nerf to McCree came in 2 very specific changes in his kit. First, his Peacekeeper's damage was reduced at long ranges. As we talked about before, he had 0 damage drop-off, effectively making him a sniper, which Blizzard admitted wasn't the vision they had for him. So at medium and long ranges, McCree could still do some damage, just not one-shot heroes from a mile away. Next, Blizzard brought down the duration of Deadeye from 20 seconds to 10, and that was a massive change in the way the ability worked, as well as how allied and enemy players dealt with things while Deadeye was active. The zoning ability was severely reduced and forced the McCree player to make the decision much faster as to when to pull the trigger. This gave McCree players and their allies a sense of urgency to combo or position themselves properly, instead of taking their sweet time with the 20-second duration. This also gave the enemy team a chance to properly counterattack after Deadeye, and was used in much quicker fashion, instead of hiding away from a point or objective for what seemed like an eternity. These 2 direct changes to McCree's kit really helped reel him in a lot and put him firmly as a mid-range skirmisher and high-damage flanker instead of a sniper. Now secondly, Blizzard released a few heroes that we talked about before that had direct counterplay to McCree. D.Va had Defense Matrix, which at the time completely negated McCree's normal shot, fan the hammer, flashbang, and his ultimate, so literally everything he can do except roll. Now this made D.Va a fantastic tank choice for a McCree heavy team. However, D.Va was a little weak overall, so it wasn't picked all the time. Mei was also a decent choice up against him, since she has a higher than average health pool, meaning she can take a few extra shots, she can potentially block the stun from the flashbang with her ice block, and she can even wall him off when he tries to ult, rendering him pretty ineffective. Now Genji was also a great anti-McCree in a couple of ways. Deflect could simply help Genji use the McCree's kit against him with decent frequency, and of course Genji's mobility could get him in close and confuse the McCree, lining him up for the kill. These two major factors dropping in at once put McCree firmly in his place and brought him in line with the rest of the roster. Now, McCree used to be a nearly unstoppable force in the early days of beta, and while he's still a solid hero who can do loads of damage and really help a team, he'll never be quite as ridiculous as he once was for that magical month in 2015 when the beta first dropped. I'm wondering if any of you guys played back in the beta, and if so, what you guys thought about it, if there were some things you liked more about the game back then, or if not. I started playing beta a couple months in, but I was making videos about Overwatch on the Overwatch Moments channel on the day 1 of beta, so I've been really invested in this game from the start, and it's really fun to go back on that now. Anyway, that's it from me, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you so much for watching. You're all beautiful, and I'll see you next time. Peace.